The one thing no parent wants to ever experience is the death of their child. It's so destabilizing that no word in the English language can describe a parent losing a child. So imagine the feeling going through a young mother running to her driveway after hearing her youngest son scream at the top of his lungs. Getting to the driveway, she found her son, and what she discovered was so disturbing that it would change her life and belief forever. It turns out that her son had been here before, and worst of all, he was remembering the vivid details of his death. Colleen Hawken never believed in these kinds of things. It might as well be a fairy tale, so when she read a book about reincarnation called Many Lives, Many Masters by a famous American psychiatrist, Brian Weiss, she thought nothing of it. The book was about something called past life therapy. She was fascinated by what Dr. Weiss said about using past life therapy with his patients to help them deal with whatever emotional trauma they could be going through. In the book, he said that kids sometimes tell their parents about having lived a past life, but most parents think their kids are just making up stories or have a very rich, active imagination, when in fact, the kids are telling the truth and, in a way, asking for help on how to deal with such experiences. After reading the book, Colleen thought to herself, "My kids never say anything strange," and that was all. She had 2 kids at the same time named Blake and Trevor Hawken. Their father was also in the picture, although we don't have a name. Basically, she just found the book interesting to read, nothing more, nothing less. And to be fair, nothing happened for a very long time. Then, one morning, probably in late 1992, they were getting ready to go to school. Colleen was in the kitchen, and Blake was standing at the front door, watching his older brother Trevor wait for the school bus. Out of the blue, Blake screamed at his brother to get off the street, yelling, "The bus is coming." The shriek terrified Colleen as she ran to where her sons were, first to Trevor to make sure he was okay. Standing close to Trevor was Blake, with his hands on his left ear, telling his mom that his ear hurt. This was all confusing to Colleen, who thought her worst fear had come true. She held Blake and started checking him for injuries. To her, she thought maybe he fell and that's why he screamed so loudly. Blake was still telling his mom that his ears hurt. Colleen then asked why his ears hurt so much, to which the little kid replied that a truck hit him. Colleen turned around and, of course, there were no signs of any truck. Heck, there were no tire marks or marks on the road to show a truck had passed by. She looked at Blake and came up with the next possible solution, which was maybe a kid at school had hit him with a toy truck yesterday. So she asked him about that, and Blake told her it wasn't a child, but a man. He went into further detail, saying a big man hit him with a big truck, and he gave a reference to a truck that usually passed their street to show how massive the truck was. She didn't want to dismiss what her son was saying because she was interested in what he was trying to say, but she also didn't want to put words in his mouth, so she asked him what happened. He told her in detail how the truck had hit him. When she asked him where he was hurt, he said all over because he had gone under the wheels. He then made sweeping motions with his arms over his left side to show how badly he was hurt. While he was talking, his mother could see the pain on his face as he showed how badly he was hurt. He wasn't just trying to skip school, he was visibly disturbed and in pain, even though there were no signs of injuries. She asked, "Then what happened?" Blake tells her that the man took him from the ground, placed him in his truck, and took him to his school. That didn't make sense to Colleen, but she got an epiphany that maybe her son was describing the building as a school instead of a hospital because he might not have understood what a hospital building looked like. At first, she thought he was making it up, but then she thought about how a 3-year-old could imagine a truck running over him. Then her attention went to her older son, Trevor. Did he watch some R-rated movie with Blake when she wasn't around or looking? She asked Blake if he saw the truck on TV, and he rudely replied, "No, it happened in the street." She then asked the very question she was scared of asking from the beginning. "Did you die?" to which he replied in a very casual tone, "Yes." Colleen was confused. She had not experienced this before. This wasn't looking like a kid throwing a tantrum. It was something else. She could see the fear in her son's face. Her brain was working overtime trying to find answers, and that's when she remembered the fictional yet interesting book she read ages ago. It was the only thing that provided an answer to what she was experiencing. She was now thinking, could this be a case of reincarnation? She didn't know what to think of it. All she knew was that she needed help with her son. She honestly considered therapy, but deep down in her gut, she knew the conventional therapy wouldn't help her son. After a while, Colleen decided not to ask him about the accident any further, in the hopes that he would forget about it. However, even though she chose not to talk about it, something in Blake had been set off that just made him depressed. She was stumped on what to do. Blake still believed and talked about his death, and for a 3-year-old, that was a strange and scary thing to say. One day, she was reading a magazine when she saw an ad from a woman called Carol Bowman calling on anyone with cases of reincarnation stories to be interviewed and studied. It was like an answered prayer for Colleen. This woman, Carol, could help her son. And that was how she got in touch with Carol Bowman. Carol Bowman is an author, speaker, counselor, and therapist from the United States. She is best known for her work in studying cases of reincarnation, especially those involving young children. Though now she is a believer, at first she wasn't. The first ad she put up, which Colleen saw, was for her to investigate these cases from a scientific point of view. If anything, she was trying to understand what reincarnation is and why some people remember and others don't. And to be fair, science is filled with people asking weird questions like that. It is questions like that that made us put a man on the moon or explore space. We just want to know. So, in January 1993, Carol Bowman put an ad in the Mothering magazine asking parents who thought their kids were talking about a past life to get in touch with her. A couple of months after the ad came out, that's when Colleen saw the ad and contacted Carol. Colleen then told Carol the story of her 3-year-old son, Blake. She told Carol how crazy it was to hear her son talk about the event in such a serious way, as if she should have known about it. At no point did he make it sound like he was joking or making it up. And sometimes he would be mad at her for asking silly questions, as if she should know about the events that led to his death. Over the next few months, his depression got worse. At first, his mother didn't notice any change, but then he stopped playing and his normal happy personality and sense of humor were just gone. Anytime Colleen walked into their living room, she would often see Blake staring blankly at the TV or looking out the window at nothing. Blake's personality had changed, and the generally happy child had become a sad child. His mother felt terrible about his demeanor. Whenever she had a moment to herself, she would try to cheer him up or play his favorite music, which would make him dance at first, but after a while, he would sit back and just stare into space. Now, Blake's strange condition grew from depression to him complaining about his body. Almost every day, Blake would complain that his arm, leg, or eye hurt. The pain was always on the left side of his body. And whenever his mother tried to comfort him, he would rudely tell her to leave. It was like a phantom pain that only he could experience. His mother then thought that if he couldn't tell her directly what was bothering him, he might be able to show her his problems through pictures. And that worked. Blake would scrawl lines and other marks on a piece of paper and say, "These are my ouches." She then tried to hug him and tell him, "Maybe I can help you. Know that I love you very much." But he replied, "I love you, then I hate you." He seemed to love and hate her at the same time, and he didn't know why. Weirdly enough, she couldn't bring this problem to her husband or to her family. She feared that her husband might blame her, which was very common back then. A failed home usually reflected poorly on the woman more so than the man, and she didn't want society shaming her, so she was very confused about what to do. Luckily, the universe was on her side, and was getting ready to show her an epiphany that would greatly solve this mystery. 3 months later, when she and her family went to London for Christmas, a scary event gave her a sign about what might have caused her son's sudden change, and maybe his death. London was packed with people shopping, causing a lot of traffic, both on the road and on the sidewalk. Everyone was squished together on the sidewalk and couldn't move. Blake was sitting in the stroller at the edge of the curb when a large truck suddenly came around the corner. Blake saw this and, out of the blue, jumped into the path of the oncoming truck. Luckily, his mother saw him in time and screamed at him to get back, but he just stood there as if he was frozen. She couldn't grab him because she was behind the stroller, but her husband quickly and thankfully grabbed him and pulled him to safety. The truck driver slammed on the brakes, cut them off, and just yelled at the family for not watching their child and almost putting him in trouble. While Blake was receiving the scolding of a lifetime from his dad, Colleen couldn't help but wonder if Blake's depression had anything to do with what he told her a few months earlier about being hit by a truck. Did it mean that Blake had tried to go through the same thing again? To instigate the same pattern? Now, Colleen was scared that he might try to run under a moving truck again, and she thought his behavior was dangerous and that he needed help right away. After listening to Colleen's story, Carol didn't want to suggest traditional therapists because she was sure Blake's problems were caused by trauma from a past life, and most therapists wouldn't know how to treat a past life memory. Instead, Carol suggested that she talk to Blake about the truck accident, but wait until he was calm before bed. Colleen did as she was told, and just before bedtime, she told Blake, "You were hit by a truck, right?" He said yes, and she said, "But that was a different life, and you were in a different body, and you had a different mother." Suddenly, her son's face lit up, and he said, "A different mother?" She told him, "Yes, and now you're safe." He instinctively understood, and Blake's depression and gloom were gone. Even though he didn't know what she meant logically, in his gut, he understood. It was like hearing those words from his mom was all he needed to be certain that history wouldn't repeat itself. The next day, he was back to being his cheerful and happy self, and the phantom aches and pains on the left side of his body went away. Colleen finally got her son back. The religious or philosophical idea of reincarnation, which is also called rebirth or transmigration, is that after a person dies, their spirit or soul starts a new life in a different body. Basically, with this belief, it means no one dies ever. We are just recycled souls. Some people will go as far as quoting the first law of thermodynamics, which states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only altered in form, just to prove their point from the world of science. Indian religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism all believe in reincarnation. It is also an esoteric belief in many types of Judaism. Some famous old Greeks like Pythagoras, Socrates, and Plato believed that the soul could move from one body to another, and now we have billions of people who believe in reincarnation. And to be honest, I understand why people would believe in reincarnation. Blake Hawken isn't just an isolated incident. There are many reported cases of reincarnation. Cases of kids knowing things that their parents don't even know about. And sometimes, when the parents try to prove these kids wrong, they are astonished at how right their kids were, making the parents believers. Take, for instance, the peculiar case of Ryan Hammonds. Ryan had swollen adenoids when he was young, which made it hard for him to hear and meant he was always late to talk. He didn't start to use full words until he was 4 years old and had his adenoids taken out. After that, he started to say he wanted to go home to Hollywood. He begged his mother constantly to take him there so he could see his other family, which included his 3 adopted boys. He would make up stories about Hollywood and his role in directing movies. He also talked about working for an agency that helped change people's names. After much investigation into his claims, it turned out he was talking about the life of Marty Martin, who ran a talent agency in Hollywood and died 40 years before he was born. When his parents finally took him to Martin's house, Ryan recognized Martin and a few other people in the photos. Even though he never got to meet Martin's adopted kids, he did see the buildings that had been Martin's home and talent agency. Both of them were just like he had described them years before he ever saw them, even pointing out sections in these buildings that people living there didn't know about. But here's the kicker. Just like Blake, once he got acknowledgement that he was telling the truth about being reincarnated, the memories stopped. It was like he got closure. I could go on, but there are millions of cases like this that just have no answer, that leaves you just speechless. In such, this actually happened to a therapist. Dr. Helen Wambach, a therapist, wanted to disprove reincarnation. She wanted to show it was maybe a bad case of false memories or some mental medical phenomenon that could be explained. She interviewed thousands of people and collected a large number of memories/records of past lives that could be linked to specific times in history. She found out that the percentage of people who remembered being upper, middle, or lower class for each time period matched the known population demographics for that time. This experiment/interview was done in the 1960s and 1970s, a long time before the internet and TV shows about history and old things, so it was almost hard for people to be influenced. 20 people could lie, sure, but thousands? Not so much. There have also been some very detailed memory cases that can't be logically explained. While researching the Hawkins case, I didn't come across anything from anyone or anywhere that pointed to something fishy. And at one time, I found myself asking, is reincarnation real? So, does reincarnation exist? The answer to that question for me personally is I don't know. Both sides provide a compelling argument. The only issue I have with reincarnation is why don't we all remember our past lives? If reincarnation exists, we should all be able to remember it all. How else are we supposed to learn from our mistakes if we don't even know what they are? You just expect me to figure out the right answers by just winging it with no clue, over and over again? And let's say I make progress once I die, my memories are wiped and once again I'm to figure stuff out and in most cases continue from where I stopped in my past life? And how do I continue from where I stopped when I don't even know where I stopped? Look at these two logic, for example. One, if the world is endless, then people would have had plenty of time to pay off all their karma, and by now there would be no more evil, and they would have reached nirvana. Maybe Genghis Khan is that barista that sells coffee, and Hitler is that dog you all love on Instagram. Basically, peace is everywhere on Earth. But this is not what we see every day. Still, some might say that those bad people are just new or young souls. So let's look at the second point. 2. If there are younger souls that haven't learned enough to become what we think of as good people or to transcend to a higher level of existence, how is it decided what kind of life they will have? Since there are new souls, we don't know their karma. How do you know if a new soul will suffer or enjoy since they don't have any karma yet? Why would a brand new soul get to suffer? And when that soul makes decisions to alleviate its suffering, the soul is judged for eternity? Wouldn't it be best if the soul never existed in the first place? I can explain why I and a lot of people believe it is false, but the truth is that to date, there is no scientific method for proving or disproving reincarnation. It's all on you and what you believe in. There are some cases that just surpass our logic of things. Like, how do you explain a kid remembering something that even family members didn't know about? It's crazy. Or in this case, talking of being killed by a bus in a vivid and descriptive manner. It's just one of those cases where we might never have an answer, just like the most mysterious mountain in the world, where no one has ever climbed, no plane has ever flown over, and anyone who dares to climb to the summit just simply dies.